All right, we've had our audio test. Thank you. Welcome to our August Assessment Accountability Assessment Directors meeting. We're grateful for your time that you're giving us today. We understand that there are many new assessment directors across the state of Utah, and we welcome you to this meeting and appreciate those of you who were able to attend our new assessment directors meeting that we held last week. We've got a full agenda today. We've spent time, I'll say this up front, because by the end of the meeting you might not believe this, but we've spent time reducing our slide deck over the last couple of days because it didn't seem like we'd be able to fit it into our 3 hours. We have some guests that will be with us today, and when we get to that point, we'll introduce them, including some of our friends from the data and statistics team that will be here to talk about Tableau and access to the data. As we get started, I want to give you a question just to think about. You don't need to respond to this right now, but to think back to your decision to choose education as a career and see if you can remember the why to that question. All the choices, all the different options that were available to you, just think for a moment about the why. Why did I choose to go into education? And when we get to my thought of the week, which will actually be just a short video clip, then you'll have additional time to reflect on that and to understand what I believe is the answer to that is a real power in our lives. And the people that we work with, our ability to answer that and to live by that why really affects the quality of the interactions that we have with other people. All right, let's go ahead and get started. The other thing I want to point out, for those of you who are here in our room with us today, at the most recent school board meeting, our board recognized art work from USB employees. Each month, they'll recognize student artwork, but this last month, they wanted to recognize employee artwork. So the artwork that you see around the room was produced by different employees for the State Board of Education. And the reason I want to highlight this is Jared Wright, one of our own colleagues, over here on this front side. Those two pieces of artwork are his artwork. And it was a surprise to me, even though I've worked with Jared now for almost 5 years. And I knew him in a previous district, so we didn't work together, but we knew each other. And his family, children went to the elementary school where I was principal for a time. I did not know that he was an artist as well, so I recognize that. While we're here, just before you leave, I encourage you to take a look at some of the art pieces. Okay, so Kim has, we've got up here a slide that was sent out in our AD memo, I think, as well previously, but this is just information around the Tableau access. Those of you who've been around a while will remember that there's a file that we used to receive. I think it was a Microsoft Access database file that was called the SURF file. We would look forward to this, at least when I was in the LEA, to get that and to start to dig into the results from the previous year's assessments. And that file would contain a lot of the assessment data from the prior year. Our data statistics team is moving to what we now call the Tableau SURF file, and that was released on Monday of this week, and we'll spend time today talking about that. Hopefully each of you have an account so that you can participate when we get to that point. Let's go to the next slide, just to review of the Nearpod and how to take notes in Nearpod. We continue to send the slides out ahead of time, while in addition to trying to create an environment in our digital hybrid meeting where we can have productive interactions to make the meeting as engaging as possible. Okay, next slide. A reminder about our learning intentions and success criteria. Our role for the time that we spend together includes these 4 items, but an overall umbrella is we see our work is to support each of you and the responsibilities that you're charged with in your LEAs to successfully administer statewide assessments, to be an expert in assessment and understanding the data related to that assessment in your community and environment, and to understand the policies and rules that are applied to all of us so that you can be aware of those and have the support you need to ensure that they're applied in your own environment. So, all right, Kim. We have a new employee. Maureen, are you with us?
Right here.
Oh, right here. Right here, right next to me. I think we announced at the end of the year that our data analyst, we were losing Melissa to data privacy. So she's still at the State Board of Education, and but not no longer supporting the assessment accountability team. And we're very happy to introduce Maureen to us today, who's been previously employed in Salt Lake District. And I'm going to just turn the time over to you to tell this group a little bit about yourself, some things that are noteworthy and memorable.
All right. Well, as Darren said, I worked for the Salt Lake City School District for 10 years. So this isn't entirely new to me, so that's good. I can hit the ground running a little bit, but Melissa has been so helpful to me since I started. So I'm trying to get right up to speed. A few things about me. I love a true crime podcast. Give me a podcast about murder or cults or something good like that. I'll listen to that all day long. My favorite food is dessert. I love dessert. I like to make dessert. I like to bake. When I grow up, I want to be Mary Berry from the British Bake Off. I've got 2 kids, a boy and a girl. I've got 2 cats, also a boy and a girl. They work with me in the basement of my house every day when I'm at home. They're slightly high maintenance, but we work it out. I love a puzzle. I love problem solving. So I think this job is probably a good fit for me, and I think we'll work out everything, and I think it's going to be good.
Yeah. Do you have a podcast title you'd recommend? One of your favorites?
There is a podcast called "Was I in a Cult?" that I quite like. Spoiler alert! Yes is always the answer to that question.
Was I in a cult? Okay. So there's our recommendation for those who like the crime scene.
There you go.
Thank you, Maureen. And then Maureen will have, we'll get to know more about Maureen's work a little bit later on in this meeting. Where that one's coming from.
Somebody's computer.
Okay.
I think it's fixed.
All right. Okay. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes. I think this video clip is just over 2 minutes long. And again, when I saw this, it really was something that got me to reflect again on why I do the things I do, what things are important to me, and the influence that can have on other people. So let's just watch this short clip together.
But the key really isn't to know what, the key is to know why. When you know your why, you have options for what your what to be. For instance, my why is to inspire people to walk in purpose. My what is in my what is writing books. My what is going out with some friends to eat. In fact, another what that is moving towards my why is a web series that we have out now on Break Time. So every Wednesday at 3 o'clock, you should subscribe to the channel. We do a series called Break Time on YouTube. At 3 o'clock, we drop a new episode. One episode in particular, I'm going to show you a clip to. We're in Winston-Salem. So Break Time is how it works. Travel the country, understand a curve, probably an hour and a half. In the middle of my show, I'll just sit down and start talking to the audience. And funny just happens. Or I'll meet somebody who's really interesting. So I met this one guy in Santa who teaches music at school. I have to teach music. Sing. Check it. Director. Yes, sir. All right, so let me get a couple bars, like Mason Prince. First part is. I'll speak. And say, my need. That brother said, now, the uncle just got out of jail. You got shot in the back when he was a kid. I'm just saying, let me see the little version real quick, for I'm going to see if that exists. First time I asked him to sing, he knew what he was doing. The second time I asked him to sing, he knew why. You know your why, your what has more impact. Because you want it worse.
Okay, I think it's always good to reflect on our why. Consider that with some regularity. Let's go to our next slide. This is just, again, not new information. We've shared this previously in an AD memo. We are still on schedule for these timelines for data release. I'll keep this group informed if there's any changes that come up that delay this release. But as of today, I'm happy to report we're still rolling forward with an expectation we'll be able to meet these.
So September 19th is the important start.
Yeah, the 19th would be the school report card for LEA review, not public release. Give you a chance to review it for two reasons. One is quality assurance from your eyes, but the primary reason is to make sure that you're able to prepare your messaging to the public, your public around the results that will come out on that school report card. Remembering, this is the first year since the new school accountability legislation that passed in 2017 where an overall school rating will be included. So it won't be highlighted on the school report card. The way it's displayed, it won't be front and center in a way that maybe some of our traditional school report cards, the PACE or the SPAR, some of those older ones, but it will be included this year under the requirements of state statute. Great question, Al. The next slide is actually one that I've recycled from last year as we get ready to talk about with our public to communicate interpret to provide guidance around the results that we're going to be talking about in the coming days and months. Just to remember that the population of students that are included in that data is an important thing to highlight and to try to do that up front. We'll see that's particularly important this year with our secondary students, UTAS Aspire Plus, and even in our 8th grade assessment results. So next slide, please. In the spirit of that, the next couple of slides just highlight the participation rate, statewide participation rates over the last year. And you'll see that for RISE, particularly in our elementary level, we've returned to nearly the 2019 participation levels, and we exceed the participation levels that we would have seen in 2016, 17, where parental opt-out rates were approaching 6% of our population, just for that participation code. Let's go to the next slide where we'll see, again, with UTAS Aspire Plus, this group may have explanations for this, but I don't have an explanation of why our 9th and 10th grade participation rates didn't respond in a similar way that we saw with our RISE, especially our elementary school level. Some of my theories are that because we continue to have delayed reporting on this assessment, the usability of this for students and for classroom teachers is diminished. We press forward and expect, we've got one more TAC meeting this fall that we need to finalize some work with our vendor. We fully expect to have results for UTAS Aspire Plus available within 48 hours of the student taking them in the spring. Again, we'll keep this group obviously informed about that as we move forward. Again, the October TAC meeting is where we should have some final details from the vendor and our technical assistance committee moving forward what that will look like. But that's a high importance to us to be able to get to the spot where we're using a pre-equating process with that tool to be able to provide the proficiency scores and the predictive ACT score. Be interested though if there are any others that have theories or ideas of why that secondary rate hasn't responded and rebounded the way that we see with our rise. If you're with us virtually, you can put that in the chat if you have thoughts or ideas, things that you've seen that provide answers to that. Or if you're in the room, you can just share your comments or come off mute. Yeah, if like Kim says, if you're brave.
I'll say we've always had lower participation rates for secondary. We've had less trouble with opt-outs we've had in the past, but our break is about middle school. We go from pretty much everyone tests to
Almost no one.
Yeah.
So in your LEA, this number isn't necessarily, it's not a description between 2019 and 2022. It's just that's our environment, and we've returned to about what that felt like pre-pandemic.
Historically, that's what we see.
Anyone else have thoughts? You see in the comments, we've got students who want to opt out, more prevalent in the secondary. ACT is no longer required. It's interesting because the ACT in Utah, most of our universities, if not all of them, public universities didn't require the ACT pre-pandemic. Now that's not true with scholarships always, but as far as admissions goes, and I think it was MIT, one of the prestigious universities has reintroduced ACT and SAT as a requirement recently. I think it was MIT.
It was MIT.
They felt like their admissions requirements that didn't include that were actually not as equitable, I think, was their explanation they gave. So I'm just going to look through the minutes here. Looks like most people are agreeing that the opt-out rate is just higher. PR issue with Aspire Plus. Okay, thank you for your thoughts and comments. And then just again to highlight, when we get to the achievement results for the Utah Aspire Plus, the fact that our participation rates are what they are, it decreases the value of that data set for us to be able to understand academic standing collectively or in aggregate manner for our students across the state of Utah. Okay. We go into our preliminary results for RISE. You'll see here that in most cases we see what would be referred to in the educational measurement community. The things that I've been reading is a V-shaped recovery, a return. Remembering that in 2021 we spoke very loudly and clearly that you shouldn't use those results in a longitudinal comparison. And so it's an outlier year because of the population differences in those groups. But in comparison to 2019, we see in most of our grade levels in content areas for elementary up through 7th grade, sure, some recovery evidence, which is optimistic. I also like to remind people that I speak with that we should maintain humility with what we know and what the data can tell us. Obviously, the more data points that we have and longer period of time that we have to analyze that, the more confidence we can have in the assertions that we make about what the data is telling us. Before we move to the next slide, are there any comments or thoughts on the information that you're seeing here?
Matches my district pattern pretty well.
Okay, so how's indicated that for Canyon School District, this pattern looks very similar?
Not back to 2019, but it's better than 21. The J.
Recovery. Brooke has put a comment in the chat about looking at the wide data set. Same cohort of students, grades 3 through 8. There's also a pattern of increased proficiency from last year. One thing we haven't got here is student growth percentiles. We're still doing work on that in our agency, and you'll be interested in understanding is the rate of growth higher or lower than what we've seen previous years. So that'll be additional information that will be important for us as we communicate to our audiences. Okay, let's go to the next slide, which is Rise Math.
This meeting posted to YouTube,
This one will be
so you're publicly releasing the data for RISE right now.
preliminary data. Yeah.
I understand it's being released. Yeah. Okay, just want to know, so I talked to my board,
Yeah.
realize once it's YouTube.
Yeah. Okay, so Rise Math preliminary results. You'll see here one thing that's interesting is that fourth grade, that percent proficient is a match to what we had in 2019. You see similar patterns here. We know that our overall proficiency in math, especially as we move into the secondary levels or the upper grades, is lower than ELA, but we're seeing evidence again of recovery or return in proficiency levels. And we'll pause on this slide. If there are any comments?
I do have one comment.
Yeah.
In looking at the sixth grade, because I think this is kind of common with a lot, I don't think it's just our district, my district. Anyway, what are some of the things that maybe other districts are doing to address this sixth grade kind of drop off in math proficiency? If there are some districts that are doing some really great stuff that seems to be working, I mean, we try to address it, but this doesn't seem to be just a Emory district problem. So
Yeah, you can see out of the full data set, if Emory
Yeah.
looks similar, you're seeing that there
Yeah.
are many, or most LEAs would have similar patterns.
right. So I was just wondering if somebody had maybe done some things or tried something that seemed to be effective. We'd love to share it.
Hey, this is Rachel Walker. I'm with American Leadership Academy. I was a sixth grade teacher for several years before I became a testing director. And our big thing for sixth grade was that we really addressed the transition from those elementary standards and that they were moving into the middle school standards. And we really, really focused on RTI and tier 2, tier 3, and going back to fill in those standards that some of those kids didn't have completely solidified. That was probably our biggest thing, and it's still a huge challenge anyways.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we've got the transition is addressed in the comments, and then we have a comment as well, a question about RISE and UA plus proficiency levels, and then comparing that to at least in this particular early, 85% of their students go on to successfully pass concurrent enrollment courses. I'm assuming that's aligned with math, concurrent enrollment math courses perform well on those. The other checkpoint that we have is the NAEP assessment, which is administered in the 4th and 8th grade. So every other year we'll get a check to see if our student proficiency rates on our state assessment system there's some alignment or consistency of what we're seeing on NAEP. And Utah is considered a top truth teller state, meaning that the results that we typically see on our NAEP assessment results, percent of kids proficient, is highly correlated with what we see on our state assessment results as well. Keep looking at the comments here. Questions about math programs that are being used, curriculum materials that are being used. I don't have an answer to that right now, but it's a good question. Okay, let's go on to science. Moving through our slides. Science scores. Well, very similar pattern of what we see in math and language arts. Okay. Let's go into Utah Aspire Plus. It's the 4 subtests that we administer for 9th grade. And again, the hesitation on being able to value this data, given that the participation rate is around 85%, particularly in the 10th grade, which is our next slide, Kim. So while we see some evidence of things that are not as promising as what we see with the elementary, and we really need to find other data points to either validate what assumptions or inferences are being made through this data or to counteract it.
Is this on the state core standard side, or is this on the ACT predictive benchmark?
This is on our proficiency on so not a predictive ACT score, but we're using the 4 sub-tests that are within that. And if you remember, this is a hybrid assessment. All of the standards on each of these tests are aligned with the Utah State Core. Some of them come, theoretically, half of those items would come out of the ACT Aspire item bank, and half of them would come out of the Utah custom written item bank. That's not true across, it's not exactly 50%. And in math, we were only able to use a very small number of ACT items from their Aspire bank because of alignment problems. But all of these items are aligned with the standards of the Utah Core. Okay, let's go to the next slide. And this is just a reminder, this time of year as schools are sending out notification to parents about their rights, we sometimes see things come in through our hotline. They go to internal audit. We used this last year. We shared this with you. Just a reminder that there are a number of rights that require annual notification. And if as an LEA, if I only choose to send out a notification about the right to opt my child out of a test, it could be perceived that I'm encouraging parents to opt their students out. So as you send out notifications to parents, I would encourage you to consider all of the rights that are included in that statute. There is a requirement that we provide notification of those things. So again, a reminder from last year, something that's good to think about as you deal with your parent communities, just try to make sure that we're as transparent as possible. The next slide is my last one, and this is a follow-up to this group. It was this time last year that we spent some time talking about the Acadians math assessment. We've talked about it more since then, but this was the first, a year ago was the first time that the concerns were raised from your group, from this group, about additional costs and burdens related to the administration of the Acadians math assessment. At that point, we had missed the window to seek legislative funding, additional funding for that assessment. And so we moved forward and I made a commitment we would revisit that. In January of this year, we talked about it again as a group, and then we had additional conversation with the curriculum directors about that time of year. The cycle or the process at the State Board of Education, they're required to provide any kind of financial requests that they're going to make during the upcoming legislative session. They're required to provide those to the governor's office in October of the fall previous to this legislative session. So they've been working on identifying their priorities since May. I created a business case, which is just the language we use here to identify a topic that we're saying the board should consider prioritizing as a funding request going forward. We received feedback from many of you in this group and also curriculum directors again. We raised that to our Board of Education, and in our most recent board meeting, they considered the fiscal request that we had submitted on behalf of, again, this group and the curriculum directors, and it unfortunately was not prioritized. So that request won't go forward from the board. Those concerns continue to persist. There's a couple of options. We recycle that business request again next year and bring it back with additional feedback from the field. It's also possible that an individual legislator could, they're not constrained like the board is in providing their recommendations to the governor's office. They work separately from that. So it's possible that an individual legislator could raise this type of a bill, bring it forward and request funding as well. So that can be done individually by a state legislator, or an organization can work with the state legislator to try to do that. I did want to report to you that we was happy that it was one of the items. They had a long list and they were only able to discuss a short number of those. But you had board members, 2 board members in particularly, that were interested enough that they raised that to the top of the debate and brought it to discussion at the very first full meeting where they had the opportunity to prioritize that if they chose to, but the board unfortunately didn't vote to move that forward. Okay, that is the end of my slides. We're going to turn the time over to, I want to talk about testing plans. And I don't know, Kim, is this going to be you?
Yep, it's me. Just a really quick reminder to everyone that your testing plans are due on September 15th. The links are provided in this slide, as well as you will have noticed that in the last AD memo and all the AD memos going forward until the deadline, we'll also have more detailed information about what you need. Just remember, please prepare your plan before you start clicking on the survey. And we think, Amy has worked with this year, we think that you will be able to have your results for your survey emailed back to you. Amy and I, our guru of Qualtrics, was playing with it this year, and we think it's going to work, so hopefully you'll get it back. And the next quick reminder, it took a little bit of time because the board requested a lot of changes. I'm getting a lot of background noise, guys, so I'm not sure if somebody's not muted, so you may want to check that, and maybe, I'm not sure. Anyway.
I think that was me, Kim. I apologize.
Okay. Testing ethics training. Of course, all of the 2023 information has now been posted on the website. The board had requested that we add all the testing times to the parental exclusion form. There were some changes that we needed to make to match R277406, but everything has been updated. The signature form, just to draw your attention to that, if you do need to use the new signature form, it's really important that you use the new signature form because when you're using the new signature form, the legislation that was on the old or previous signature form from 2022, it's been changed, and so that was added. And so the form is, if you're using an old form, they're not current, and your teachers need to sign the new one. So that's the new information. Same thing with the parental exclusion form. There are a lot of changes on the parental exclusion form. I turned my volume up, guys. I'm sorry, I have it up as pretty much as loud as I can have it. So I'm on a mic, so I'm not sure. There, I've turned it up as loud as it goes. But the parental exclusion form has been updated. If you are using a local form, please make sure that you go through and review it. You have to make sure that all of the information that is included on the state form is included on the local form. The Spanish version is being translated right now, and we will post it as soon as it goes through the translation service. But remember, the forms are updated and have to be signed by parents every single year. And now, time for our CCSI group.
Can I provide a little feedback on that?
Yes.
We do most of our sort of compliance training through like a big online Canvas course. And when I get the information in August, that's about 3 months too late. So ideally we want to get our training to our teachers in July. So if they want to do that on their own time over the summer, they can, because we've probably got 20 to 30 hours of compliance training to get to theoretically before the first day of school. So I had to put in last year's testing ethics stuff to get started because there was no way I could wait until the 11th to do that. So anyway, we can put some help our board understand. I appreciate the need for the changes, but help them understand we need them a couple of months earlier so we can get it to our teachers in time. It's a real time problem for us.
Thank you for that comment.
You're getting lots of affirmation in the chat.
We'll accelerate. Go ahead, Kim.
Yeah, we actually submitted this to the board, you guys, in February, like we do every year. But this was a extraordinary year for discussions on the standards committee. So we actually got bumped twice by them. So I'm not going to throw them under the bus, but we worked on this and we totally recognize all of this stuff and we tried. But there's, that's part of it. Greg, you put a comment in the chat about the USB East website still says 2021. You need to clear your cache because that's really why the old forms are showing up. And the only reason I know that is because it happened to me. And I emailed Emily and I said, the old forms are showing up, but clear your cache and I promise you'll see the new forms. So there's a delay somehow, but that they actually got posted last Friday. So if you're still seeing the old forms, clear your cache and I promise you'll see the new forms.
Okay, thank you, Kim. And I'm gonna just take a second to give a brief introduction to Gregory.
Thank you, Darren.
That's a really brief.
That was brief.
I got caught, like, what else am I going to say here? That I wanted to go into the Center for Continuous School Improvement, which some of you have heard us talk about that before. It's a new concept. We've been working on it at the State Board of Education for more than a year and a half.
Greg Fern, I think you're in the room. It's your turn to present.
He is. I just stepped on his toes because I started introducing him and I got myself caught in my thoughts. So well, we are very happy to have Greg with us. He's going to give us some information today that I think all of you will find very, very useful.
I am here by way of Canyons, by the way. So anyway, really appreciate being here in the agency. Kim, we're going to speed through these slides because everybody has these, but I really want to just link the Center for Continuous School Improvement to Darren's opening thoughts in terms of the why, because I think this really, really accentuates the wisdom of leadership here at the agency and also the state board to recognize that we really needed to focus on not just continuous improvement, but school improvement focused on not just TSI and CSI schools, but breaking that off to the new program, which is taking the place of Turnaround, which are Elevate Schools, which is part of why I'm here today. But under Tracy's leadership, our director, we have Ashley, administrative assistant, Jimmy Hernandez, myself, Jim Martin, Janice Sigmiller, and Heather Newell. I would just say that of our team, we're very rich with not only classroom experience, but building level administration, central office administration, which allows us to be very grounded in the work that is represented by our schools across the state. So we're very, very honored and very pleased to be working under Tracy and here at the center. So here we go. We'll go through this very quickly. So we're going to speed through these, but we just wanted to provide you pictures and kind of chief responsibilities of each of us in the Center for Continuous School Improvement. And again, we will let you look at those at your convenience. Elevate Schools. How many of you have heard of Elevate Schools or Springboard Schools? Okay, I have at least two affirming that, well, kind of a full affirmation and a half affirmation. I saw that and kind of went, there we go. So the Elevate Schools, part of what was SB 245 and changing from Turnaround is the identification of Elevate and Springboard Schools. This year we are kicking off the Elevate Schools pilot program, which is focused on TSI identified schools that are non-Title I. So this is a voluntary program. Each of the principals in your LEAs that are a TSI non-Title I school has received an invitation to apply, as well as background information about the program. Their supervisors, if we have this correct, have also received this information. So the most important thing what I want to communicate with you today is that 2nd of September is the timeline for applications. It's a very simple 7 to 10 minute application. Links have been provided to your principals and we will continue to remind them up until right before the 2nd. What I am asking of you today is if you know or you can help us understand who is the LEA contact for non-Title I TSI schools. That would be extremely helpful. And in the Nearpod chat, there is or in the Nearpod form, there is a link to a survey that can give us that information. So the highlights of the program, very simply, there will be 6 schools that will be part of the pilot program this year. Those schools will be notified after they make application. They will be notified somewhere near the end of September, 1st of October of their participation. They are going to receive unprecedented support, dedicated support. So much like our Title I schools, they will have a comprehensive needs assessment, a root cause analysis. They will have a dedicated USBE-approved continuous improvement expert. They will be provided additional funds to help them to address the needs that are emergent from the root cause analysis. And then dedicated ongoing support for project management and professional learning opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very exciting opportunity for schools. So we greatly appreciate your help in, again, identifying, if you will, please, who is the contact person in your LEA. And really, that's where I want to stop, Kim. So how did I do?
She's speechless.
And there's the link to the information. Very quick, just a couple of questions that we have in there. If you could help us out, that would really appreciate it. So, Darren?
So before we move on, are there questions for Greg? Give people online a minute to respond.
How is the funding support generated? Is it based on student population, school size, or is it a set amount?
It's a set amount, but we certainly have some flexibility within that. Great question.
Okay, I don't see any other questions.
Hey, Greg, it looks like the form, you need to release the form.
Viewing permissions.
Oh, okay. And so showing my humility, how do I do that? Yes.
Get some help and we'll get that resolved. If we can get that fixed before the meeting's over, we'll make a notification and then those of you who want to access it can get back into it at that time. Okay. Maureen,
Yes.
over to you.
Alrighty, so I'm here to talk about rostering for your assessments this year. First of all, if you're contacting me about students who aren't rostered on your tests, just a quick recap about what is safe to send in an unsecured email and what is unsafe. The best way to give me student information is using their SSID. I can pretty much figure out all the rest of the information about a student if you send me their SSID. You can send me your LEA student number for that student, always the test names, so that I know which test they're trying to get into and are unable to get into. You can also send along school name and class and teacher name. That's fine to put in an unsecured email. Try never to send student name in an unsecured email. Any pronouns that someone can decipher a gender. If you must, you can use they, them. And also any sort of accommodations, that is information that doesn't need to come in an email. If I need to know any more about it, I can give you a call back and we can work it out. Here's just a quick reminder of how your student data flows through our system. Starts with you, your student information system. You send that through to UTREX. It's validated first to make sure your information is complete and accurate. Then student information is entered into UTREX, flows from UTREX to whatever testing vendors we have and we use. So here's some general reminders. You should allow 48 hours between you entering that student information for them to get into an assessment system. Students can't take a test before your school year starts and before their course entry date. And please, once again, don't share any of that personally identifiable information via an unencrypted email.
And I'd like to add something to that as well. One thing we're noticing is that teachers are emailing you, and then you guys are forwarding their questions to us. And the student names and all of that information is also appearing in our emails. We really need you to make sure that you are redacting the student names. You'll see, you will see us redact it all the time, so.
All right, so a quick checklist. If a student is not showing up on a test roster, here are some things you can check. Make sure they're actively enrolled in a course that triggers that assessment. Make sure your course codes are correct. Make sure your entry and exit dates are correct. A lot of times students are entered into courses before they're entered into school somehow. The dates get switched around. Make sure that, once again, make sure those course codes are correct. Check your LEA's submission in the data gateway, and I think I have a slide coming up with a little illustration of where you can check that. Make sure that the student's 1% flag is marked on their record if they need to take an alternative assessment. And you can always email me and I can check it out for you also. So here is where you would check for errors. If you go to the UTREX overview in the data gateway, and it shows you have warnings and fatal errors. A record should still go through if it has a warning, but if it's got a fatal error, it's not going to go through to UTREX. Also, if you are using Utah Compose, you'll want to check for stale data. It just means your data hasn't been uploaded for a while and there are a lot of changes in your records, say like from the end of a school year to the beginning of a school year. So if you have this little warning that you have stale data, there should be a little reset button next, right to the right of that Utah Compose red indicator there, and so you can reset your data. Your examined data file is located right here on the UTREX review. You can download it and look at your submission. It can be a very big file, just so you know, so it can take a while to download if you want to check it out. If you do need to send us a file with student information, you can use MoveIt. It's a secure file transfer site. You can send us any sort of PII through this, and we can send you things back through MoveIt. Still not 100% familiar with MoveIt. So Kim, if you have anything you'd like to add to that.
Actually, the best person to add that is Emily, because she's in charge of it.
And she can give you access. So take it away, Emily.
If you don't have access, let me know. If you're a new AD, I will have to confirm and make sure that we have you updated on the AD list. And we try to keep access limited. Don't want too many hands in the cookie jar.
All right, so for Apple coming up, once again, it's going to be a nightly upload into Apple. We're going to begin loading students in the beginning of October, and the testing window opens October 17th. You'll need to clean up your teacher accounts on the site, and last year's accounts should still be there. Once we start sending the data, please review it before you need it. So just make sure you're checking ahead of time to make sure everything looks good before kids get in there to take tests. And please definitely check those AD memos for any sort of updates. And if you can share all this information with your dual immersion directors, that'd be great. And please review the Apple School List or using it to update your rostering process. We're going to be sending that out.
To whom?
That's a good question.
Because we really need both groups to see it to make sure that we get it right. The ADs and
And
the the
The new
TLI
TLI.
coordinators or at the district level, they really need to have their eyes on it.
To make sure it gets out
Thank you.
to everybody. It's not quite ready yet, but should be shortly. We do have this video on how to manage Apple teacher accounts. I don't think we have. It's available on the Apple website. Also, this video, you can play it from here. I think we're probably good for the next slide. And finally, any questions, please feel free to contact me at any time. 24/7. Let me sleep a little bit, please, but I'm available.
Thank you, Maureen. And again, we're grateful to have you on our team.
I'm glad to be here.
Hopefully your induction to the state board is going well.
So far, so good.
Good. All right, Kim, I see we're going to Tableau next. I don't know if David or Aaron, who is committed to providing that training, and if they're online or not.
From the office today, I saw.
They may not be quite finished with their meeting yet, so we could take our break now instead of taking it at the end of Tableau training.
Okay, let's do that, and then I'll walk up and see how close they are to finishing their data and statistics team meeting.
That sounds great.
What's that?
Irish step dancing. Let's see
Alright.
Step dance, huh?
We're on, audio's good?
Audio's back. Before we get started, I just wanted to follow up with the group. The survey link that Greg put out, the settings have been changed, and you're now able to go in and respond to his request to find out who in your LEA is over non-Title I schools. And I didn't say that exactly the way you did.
TSI non-Title I schools.
TSI, non-Title I schools.
Thank you.
And I want to welcome David and Aaron to joining us in our meeting today. We know that they have plenty of things to do, so to come and be with us is something that we appreciate. We'll turn the time over to you, Aaron, I guess.
Thank you. I'm not doing anything in solitaire all day long. Yes, we're quite busy. All right, so this is Tableau training, your SURF files. Now, okay, I was going to say something, but it's the next slide. So right now, the data statistics teams will be presenting how to access whatever. I didn't write this. Here's the location, you can find person. So hopefully you have access. I'm just looking at that. I didn't write that. Someone else did. I don't think I wrote that. Maybe I did. Next slide. That's just where it's at. This is the one I want to bring your attention to. Watch what we talk about. Don't do it yet. Guilty parties in the room. They're jumping. I know how to do it. I'm asking you to watch. Because the problem that we run into, and I've built this into the structure, is someone's going to start pushing buttons, and they want to get into it and try it out because you're excited, because you are who you are, and I love you for that. Watch. And then we're going to try. You go to the Tableau secure site. It's tableau.schools.utah.gov. Don't try to type that in right now. Okay? You're going to get a login page. And for those who can see me on camera, great, you can see me. There's a login page. This is your LEA login credentials. I don't know what those are. I don't know if you are using Active Directory. I don't know if you are in Microsoft. You might be Google. Doesn't matter. It will work, except for when it doesn't work. And when it doesn't work, that's when you need to contact David. And David's smiling because it's like, yeah. And we have ways of helping you get through that. Every now and again, we have to go down to our IT team and get a little bit more depth in helping this. But for the most part, we can solve your login problems. Now, again, don't log in right now, please. Hal, don't log in right now. Once you log in, you will get this screen. Again, for those in the room, they can see me circling on the camera. I don't know if they can see or not, but I'm talking about the screen on the right-hand side, which is basically just a snapshot of what you should be seeing. You are going to see, again, depending on the settings and last time you're in there or what have you, on the left-hand side of that screen is going to be your navigation bar. It might be expanded, it might be collapsed. I don't know, it depends on how you set it up last time and what you pushed. This is expanded. At the very top left corner, there's a little caret that you can pull it out, whatever. You're going to go to the Explore tab. For the most part, that's where you will always go. I ever go anywhere else? Well, I do, but that's because I have to do other things. For the most part, you will only go to the Explore tab. Later on, we might be doing other things, but you'll click on the Explore tab. Next slide. Again, we're watching, we're not doing it. Once you're inside the Explore tab, you're going to have this screen that has different folders, tiles in place, and you're going to look for LEA folder. You click on that. If you're on a Mac, I think it's a double click. If it's a Windows, it's a single click. You know how to use your own machines, but you get in there, and then it's going to open up, your LEA folder, which I'm just going to say, there it is. You open that up, next slide. See, this is really simple. People should not get lost, I hope. Once we're inside of there, you're going to see a number of tabs or tiles that you can access. As you look at, yes, lots of pretty graphs. Again, most of you have been exposed to these. You've opened these up in the past and worked on. Today, we're talking about surf. So we're going to click on surf file. You would click on that, open it up. Okay, next slide. Inside of there, you have two options. You have pre-built, you have self-exploration. The pre-built are going to look like an Excel snapshot. The ones below are going to look like it's database, but you might call it a cup. I don't care. It's a cylinder. We are going to go to pre-built. Go ahead and click on the pre-built. Mine example that we went to is the Acadians math. Once we're inside of there, it's going to launch, should. Once you're inside of there, you're going to have options. Option number one, you'll be looking at is, what schools do I want to look at and include? Include all of them. There's that option up on top. Oh, you can just put one or two, whatever. What will be populating over on the side are all your students. If you're Alpine, that's going to be a lot. Sharing. If you are Tintic, not so many. It's just, it's the options. You also want to look at a couple default settings just to make sure you understand what you're seeing here. So one, you will automatically be put into your district. If you are, I think you fixed this. I didn't fix it in mine. But if you are someone who works in multiple districts, we have a few of those people, you should have a toggle up there to switch between districts as well. If that toggle is not in there, Emily, wherever you are, let us know and we'll fix the report so you can get access to it. You should see a year in there. Make sure you just look at the years. That's just kind of an important thing. Once you're inside of there, you say, okay, what I want, you have that option to go through it. Next slide, please. You're going to see the school name, the school number, the grade level, their SSID. At a bare minimum, you'll see that information. And then depending on the assessment is you're going to have, well, what kind of assessment is this? If we're talking about RISE, it's language arts, math, science inside of there. And this one, you're going to have beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of year inside of here. Again, math and reading are different, but then you'll have the test session number inside of there. And then as much as the data that we could shove in there that we're giving to you that we thought makes sense, we put into the field. Next slide. Once you've looked at that, you've got set according to what you want to see. You want to go up to the file download. Go ahead and click on that. Let's go to the next slide. And now you have some options. Again, you're looking at student level records, so you don't want to export an image and put it up in your board meeting. You know better.
Okay, yes, it doesn't have the student names, but just understand that you could. There's a cross tab, there's a PDF, there's a PowerPoint. The one you want right there is called data. You click on the data, it takes you over to the slide that we see over here on the right-hand side. It's going to ask, hey, I want to download this. That's a CSV. You download it. You have your data. Next slide. Now try it yourself. Go get a file. There's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it takes. David and I are in the room. If someone's got a question online, ask. So I said, don't. Now I'm saying, go do it. I got a question. Do it as a general, as an individual question, Al.
Individual, my account doesn't work when it used to 2 weeks
Okay.
ago. I don't know what I did.
You broke it.
2 weeks it was happy though. Happy.
What's it doing when you log in?
Just see it here.
Open up incognito window.
What?
Incognito. Should be in this one. Let me do this in
Safari?
Safari.
Do you want me to Google
Try Chrome, yeah.
I think that's what it is.
So what happens is password, like that you had to change, gets stuck inside of cache. And it's trying to shove that in first. And that's usually what's breaking it. So if you clear your cache, sort of. And then Tableau, that schools like that.
Oh, I need to talk to, so UA should be UA plus.
Anyone else having issues? David's in here too.
Well, maybe not.
This is incognito thing.
Incognito basically says
Hey,
it removes.
Brett,
So it's
Aaron,
you
Aaron?
wanted to go
Question.
back
Aaron,
here.
online,
Like, here, can you bring that?
And we have questions online.
okay. Who's going to read them to me?
So we have this first one.
Let me try to load.
Go back to
Site.
Yeah, because that's where you'll find.
Okay, so here's a couple things. If you are getting, I'm not able to log in, it's automatically just locking on you. What has happened is your cache on your browser has remembered your password that you changed last week, last month, whenever. Hell's in, yay! 2 solutions.
Follow Aaron.
2 solutions. Solution number 1, clear your cache on your browser. If you're like, I'm not allowed to, it's against district policy. Okay. Solution number 2, go over to, in Chrome, go to an incognito tab and then log in. What you need to do is force it to reassign your login. Now, if you don't like to use incognito all the time, you got to clear your cache. That's how you solve the problem. So that's the first question. I can't get in, it's locked. Try that. Okay, next question.
Likewise. Signing you in.
Okay, same issue. I'm having trouble signing in. How do we reset that? When you say reset that, again, this is your LEA login into your LEA setting. I can't reset that password. That's your district. LEA.
He's asking, how do you reset your cache?
Reset your cache. If you go up into your tools, clear cache. It's that 3 ellipses if you're in Chrome. I think it's under, is it by history or is it just clear cache? History and then clear cache. Is it everyone being successful in the room right now? I see,
No,
that's,
I'm not, but I emailed him, but I didn't get help.
he's
I
right
mean,
there.
not today, I know. So I didn't send it today,
When did you send it?
like yesterday.
Didn't even help you yesterday?
I know, but that's why I'm not saying anything because.
See, the problem is he's playing solitaire too long. David,
Today.
could you help her?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Erin,
Okay, next question. Just read that. I can't see.
when I click surf files, then the student test file, the only preset file that looks relevant upon opening it, it opens what looks like a blank file labeled Sage Student Test.
Okay, you opened up the wrong folder. Speaking to whoever said this, close that browser. It should open up a new tab. Close it, go back. What you're looking for is you're looking for the icons that look like Excels. Now, if you're not seeing any Excels in there, we've got other issues. You should see those Excels because those are pre-built, easy push, here we go. The individual, I don't know who that is. We're going to be showing you that in just a minute. I want you to be able to do the easy first stuff first. Just click on get it done. You don't have to think about much. Does that answer the question?
All right, so, yep, that was the only Excel I saw aside from Acadian.
Look, okay.
Caitlin, what LEA are you? Park City.
Park City. He's right there. What'd you do to her? You were seeing all of it.
Did they get the permissions
The
issue?
permission thing?
Could be, 'cause I know we just set Caitlin's account up,
Yeah,
so.
but we just sent her, David's gonna check on her, maybe. Caitlin, I don't know her last name.
O'Connor.
Caitlin sent an email to David Mackey, Mackay, at schools.utah.gov.
She just said she's good.
Okay.
Growth percentiles, I think I know the answer to this. Those aren't in there yet. They'll be in there as soon as we can get those.
Okay, growth. David finished the growth calculations yesterday. You did a comparison with the Center for Assessment and we got the exact results. So that passed that QA, which means for our staff meeting this morning, I will be taking the growth data. It's loaded within a staging environment and then I'm reviewing the scripts as soon as I'm done with you guys to start getting that loaded. So it's going to happen within, I want to say a week, maybe even before that. I'll let Darren know and he can send out an email, say growth's there. Yes, we are going as fast as we can. We ran into multiple issues and a couple stoppages along the way. Some of those stoppages, by the way, are LEA problems, not our problems, but we'll take it anyway. Just let you know, we're working as fast as we can to get this in. It's just, it's never an easy button, we're done. Okay, next question.
Question from Brandon in Alpine. Under our surf files, student test database, there,
Okay, don't go in the database yet. I haven't done that.
oh,
People are jumping, and I don't want to jump down too much, but yeah, don't go in the database yet. I'm going to show you that in a minute.
okay, we'll get there.
We're getting there.
Okay, next, I am not getting the option to sort by school once I am in the surf file.
LEA.
A Griffin, what LEA?
And what file?
Paradigm,
Paradigm?
Paradigm schools.
Paradigm, it's a charter.
How many schools do you have?
One.
Well, then, yeah, you only have one. So you wouldn't be sorting by schools. There is only one school. I'm confused.
Well,
But
on your slide, it had a bunch of lists of schools.
Right. But if you are only one school, if you're a Paradigm, if you're a Paradigm with multiple campuses, you'd see the multiple campuses. Does that make sense? Because
Yeah.
you are being shown exactly what you have access to.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you. Great question. Anyone else?
Question, how do you envision us using this data?
Okay. What did you say, Darren, or whoever said that? Careful.
That's for our next training session.
That's a nice training session. So, it's a great question. It depends on your ability to do your own steps. Okay, so for example, if you're like, you know what, Excel scares me, and I'm just saying hypothetically, I'm not telling you, if it's Excel by itself scares you, you're like, I really don't know what to do with this, just delete it after you've downloaded it. You're like, I don't know what to do with this thing, okay? Don't mess with it because now you've got student level data on your laptop. If I were in your shoes, what I would be doing is I would be taking these and I'd be running down the hallway to my IT staff and say, here it is, load it in the database. Or I'd be writing a script to load it in the database if I was Drew from Park City. You know, that's what I would be doing because typically you have processes of receiving data and looking at it and running it. And this is to build it in within your own SIS system. That's the request. How do I get data from the state back within my own system and do that match and run it? If you don't do that, you don't need to download the data. It will still be there. We're not taking it away. It just sits there. And so we can do different analysis, which we're going to show you in just a minute. So that's how I envision you using this data. This is just us giving you a mechanism to download it and have it. In the past, we used to put out, you have to go to the data gateway, select request to surf, you would get an access database, and then you'd hand it off to your IT team, and they would curse you, and then they would strip everything out, or you'd open up and work with whatever you did. But this, again, this is just giving you the return files. These return files come from the vendor of whatever assessment it is. We line it up with the enrollment record that we get at the end of the year. It goes through a whole bunch of quality control checks and matching algorithms to make sure we have it. We have to run it through check for SSID merge issues. We have to, you know, Darren thinks it's an easy process. He was telling me, they can just push the button yesterday. And I'm like, yeah, that works.
That was me.
Oh, Tracy was saying, that's just easy, right? It goes through this huge quality control check that we run it through, and then we pass it back off. What happens now is then we start applying different business rules to it, such as these are the state results, and we'll put it up on the data gateway, and there's the state results. Darren has already started working on that, saying, here's the results of RISE, here's the results of Acadians, here's the results of Utah Aspire Plus, and he'll present it to the board, he'll present it to the legislature, to you, what have you. I imagine you do the same thing. We will also take this data file and we start applying it to accountability rules. So what you're seeing is the exact same thing as we will be using, depending on the filters that we will utilize. So the answer is, can I disaggregate by student groups? Not in this download. I will show you how to when we get past this slide. Okay, we'll show how to do it. He can show us how we do it.
So can I again real quick?
Go ahead, question.
So another purpose, right, of this data for me in my role of special education is I direct your special education directors back to you guys because we have a whole separate indicator. If some of you remember, I presented last year, new people, you'll hear about that. But special ed has accountability, federal accountability as well under students with disabilities and how they perform and participate in our statewide assessments. So, you know, being able to look at the different participation codes, being able to disaggregate down to student groups, right? Like what group of students in schools, right, were in proficiency 1 and 2, like those that were proficient, non-proficients. There's multiple ways that's beneficial to use that data.
Yeah. Lots of ways to use the data. You don't have to do anything with it because, when I say the state will do a lot for you in preparations. And I'm going to show you how to do more of a visual exploration of the data. How many more questions do we have? I've gone 30 minutes, and this was the easy stuff.
Yeah, we better move forward. So
Okay.
Kim and I responding to saying, if you have questions viewing, email Aaron and David.
Yeah. And we'll respond as soon as we can get to you.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm standing here not responding because it's my email. Okay, all right. I'm gonna move you on to the next phase of the fun. Training is recommended, by the way, and we'll be doing more training. A wealth of online resources are easily available. Type in Tableau, how do I? You can start doing this stuff, okay? Remember, you can't hurt the data. You don't have W-R-I-T-E, permissions. You can't hurt the data. You can do weird things, but you can't hurt it. You can't delete it or anything like that. It'll just be there. It's fine. Remember, though, be careful of your conclusions that as you start exploring data and start dropping in filters and looking whatever, you might forget what you've done. So you may have applied rules or not applied filters or changed a business rule mode of calculation and its display, etc. So for example, you might be looking at it and it's doing a sum and you're like, this number doesn't make any sense. Well, I wanted to do an average. Well, you have to actually go change. Just sharing. Okay, next slide. Fun stuff. Okay, down below, you have these things that are database connections. We're going to go into math. So live connection. What happens is you'll get this blank screen. It might take it a minute, not a minute, a couple seconds to load up. You won't have anything on your screen. It's just going to be this list of variables down one side if it loads fast enough. If it doesn't load fast enough, you won't see that. But there's that new button on top. Click the new button. You're going to should only have one option, which is called workbook. Click on workbook. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. This is crosstab. So the easiest way I can explain this, or a pivot table. So you have to, A, get that into your mind first. I'm working with a pivot table. If you'd like, what's a pivot table? This is way too advanced for you. And just sit back and watch. Okay. I'm not trying to disparage anyone. I'm just saying this is what we're looking at. On the left-hand side is this long list of variables, and they're divided into two categories. I can barely see it on this screen. It's just small, but there's this little faint line in between them, which is between a measure and a dimension. The stuff down below are measurements. The stuff up above are dimensions. The main difference between the two is one is a number and the other is like a word. Categorical. Or a categorical component or something. The way this works is you want to drag and drop elements onto the column and the row bar up on top. So the example that I showed on this page, barely see what I put in there. Test sessions I put up on top, and then I put LEA name, I put school name, I put grade level. I just pulled those out. So all of that was from up here. And I dropped it in there. And then as I was going through it, I recognized that, wait a minute. What's under student ID? Clicked on it.
School name.
The test sessions under.
Test session, there we go. It's test session. I went under test session. I followed the arrow, which allowed me to go to the default properties, and I went to sort. Because the test session is sorting itself by alphabet. It's defaulted as alphanumeric or alpha. Look, go back. Thank you. So I go into the sort, I changed it so you have options. ascending, descending, automatic. I can click on that automatic drop down. I get a manual tab or a manual option. I put it in the manual option and then I just move things as I wanted it and I said, okay, and it reorders it. All I've done is I said, I want to see beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of year. E has to go after M. Just simple process. That's all I did on what I showed basically, and then I started displaying this thing. Okay. Am I going way too fast? I hope not. Let's go to the next slide. Darren, you're looking at me like,
Tim's trying to keep you moving fast.
she's like, go faster. Fine. Then what I did is I grabbed a measurement. It doesn't matter the measurement you want to use, but something that you want to explore. I grabbed the measurement, I dragged and dropped it up there, and then I get bars. Now it's graphic. It's aggregating everything inside of there. I had to look at that bar and say, well, what I have. And so this is the math composite score, and it has a little sum in front of it. I'm like, no, sum, I don't want to add up these numbers. I want to average it. So I click on that little icon that's right here, that little drop-down arrow, come down here to measurement, pop it over, change it to average. It now changes instantly for you. How?
But a lot of this structurally is like the Excel pivot tables, but you're looking for different places for features.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is a pivot table. I mean, really, that's what you're doing. You can do all kinds of things inside of here, just let you know. The more training, the more creativity, the more you can build. Okay, go ahead, next slide. And this is just the final slide to show you example of things that you can do. So as I was looking at this, I said, all right, I want to take the at or above it's not proficient, whatever math is using, at or above level, the level, whatever, let's go. Benchmark, thank you, there's the word. And I dropped it on color. And I've created a certain color schema, and I'm like, no, I want to modify that color a little bit. So I clicked on the color, I went edit color, I changed the schema that I want to look at. I went in there and said, instead of have a gradation, I want to have it step. Again, this is exploration for you. You can start looking at this. End results, I'm looking at by grade, by school, what's the beginning of the year, what's the middle of the year, what's their end of year, and is that percentage or that average score at benchmark, below benchmark or whatever. And that, I just went in and set it up. That way I can quickly view that and say, how are we doing? Do I have concerns? But I can start looking at the different schools and say, just looking at this top one, for example, say how they started off, kindergarten, second grade, we're looking okay. Okay, what happened over here? We had this interesting reversal, but then at the end of the year, my kindergarten didn't get to my predetermined flag, if you will, but I can see that the other grades did. It tells me some information. I can then turn that around in a PLC or communication with leadership or whatever it is and saying this is what we're seeing on our data. All of the data that we have out there, you can do this. It just takes a little time and practice. Some training would be recommended. Next slide, and I think we're done. Yeah, this is basically, here's a link if you're online. This takes you to Tableau training. It talks about how do you do certain stuff like this. I don't have the time today to go through all the possibilities. But like I say, there are so many resources out there. How do I do this? How do I do whatever? I just gave you the very basics of how do I navigate this thing and start building things out. Some really good training, easily available on your time. And there's a presentation. Questions?
Thank you, Aaron. The training resources, are those text-based trainings or video-based trainings? What are those?
Yes.
Both options are available.
It is online. There are videos. That one is a step-by-step guide. David, when you do a training, what do you usually look at? You just do a step-by-step guide, or? No, I look at all kinds. I watch videos. I mean, there is, it's a lot. We'll just say that. The Tableau community is huge. And multiple ways to learn how do we do certain things. So there you go.
Your staff who need to become, I'll use the term power users for Tableau, you additionally probably take them to trainings that are provided by either Tableau themselves or other entities.
Yes.
We wanted to try to provide maybe not that level of training, but some support for our ADs throughout the year. That's something someone in your staff could support us with
Yes,
2 or 3 times a year,
Absolutely.
small chunks of time.
Yep, we can do that. And actually, we're kind of planning to set that support up.
Do you have that already established for other groups in the LEAs that maybe we could piggyback assessment directors into and not duplicate?
No, you guys are the guinea pigs. The special ed directors are right behind you. But who'd you put in first? The CE, the current enrollment people. Okay. So there's other groups jumping in fairly quickly. So
Okay.
it's a combination. We'll be working with everyone. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Tracy.
Okay, accommodations and accessibility. So, I'm Tracy Gooley, the special ed assessment specialist. I don't know if we're doing introductions or not. We have new people. Jessica Wilhelm is with me. She is our secondary special education specialist. So we oversee accommodations and accessibility in all of our statewide assessments. So a reminder of what accommodations are, right? They're changes to how our students learn, or in the purpose of assessment, they're changes to how our students are accessing the assessment, right? So one thing to note, every statewide assessment will have different allowable accommodations. It is the responsibility of special ed teachers to know for the various assessments that their students are participating in, what accommodations are allowable and not allowable. For the purpose of RISE and Utah Aspire Plus, one of your responsibilities, or whoever you designate it to in your LEA, is for students that are using those specific accommodations for those assessments, the participation code accommodated needs to be added to each of those students' assessments. We actually have to report back to the feds on how many of our students in the state are participating in our statewide assessments with accommodation. So that's important. And the key to determining the various allowable accommodations for each assessment is based upon making sure that those accommodations do not invalidate or go against the construct of what's being assessed, right? And therefore the score of the assessment. Where do you find accommodations information? So there is a specific special education assessment webpage that talks about accommodations, has a bunch of request forms, guidance on there. And the Utah Participation Accommodations Policy is basically going to be that main guide that walks you through all the different accommodations and assessments. So right now on the website, you will see last year's accommodations policy. Jessica and I have been scrambling. Our goal was to have had that updated for you today. However, we have a few lingering things with a couple vendors out there, and we will hopefully be able to shoot that out to you in the AD memo next week. And then just knowing that all of your individual test administration manuals for each assessment will also indicate all those accommodations and universal tools for students too. You can find them there. Next page. One of the key resources that you'll find in that accommodations policy are the charts. We have a couple different charts that really outline all of those what we would typically see as like resources, embedded tools, right, UDL things for all students and accommodations. And then it walks you through for each statewide assessment how it applies to those. So those are really kind of a key component to the accommodations policy that's the most beneficial. When thinking about modifications, so modifications, right, are changes to what our student learns or changes to what our students are being assessed on. So in our world of assessment, the key to this is if students participate in the assessments using a non-allowable accommodation, it's considered a modification. As far as accountability, when we have a modified student they are not even included in our participation group. Okay, so if a student participates modified, they're not considered a participant, therefore they are not considered, right, they don't have proficiency. Does that make sense? Because we've modified the assessment. IEP teams do have the autonomy to make some of those decisions. We don't encourage it, right? Our assessments are one measure of what our kids are doing. We want to see how they're doing in comparison to their other grade level peers. That's important for IEP teams. So we try to discourage that, but on occasion we will have a few modified. So same thing is accommodated if we have those students participate, right, with a non-allowable accommodation, we have to code that modified as a participation code. Okay, so accommodation request forms. So listen up, there's one new thing here, but any student that is needing a scribe, the use of assistive technology, Braille, or will be participating in any RISE remote benchmarks, we need to know about that. And then we have an exceptional accommodation. If a team needs something that's not typically listed, you can fill out those request forms and send them to us. It is not so that we can come through and deny the accommodations request. That's not what we do. The purpose of those request forms are to inform us of the students that need those things so we can make sure everybody has the appropriate information and settings so that the student can go into testing day being successful in testing. So Utah Aspire Plus, if you need any of those accommodations, those will get filled out on our previous, like last couple of years, we've done request forms, you fill it out, you submit it to Jessica. Here's what the changes for RISE. We will be submitting those RISE accommodation requests through the TIDE system. So that is going to be what's new there. So go ahead, Kim. So here's what this looks like for RISE. In RISE, underneath the student preparing for testing, you'll go in and at the very bottom, you'll see a new bubble that says users, right? So instead of clicking on students where you'd go in, right, and set students in TIDE, you'll see a form that says users. And from there, you can open up and click into that student forms, and you'll have two different options you'll see. You can fill out an assistive technology request form, and then you have the scribe request form. Okay, so that's where you're going to find those. We are still kind of working through a few programming things with CAI on once those forms are filled out by you, it sends me an email notification. I can go in, approve them, turn on settings that need to be turned on. And then what we're working on is a way to get notification back to the person that submitted the form, right? Like it was either accepted or not accepted. If it's not accepted, it's because I need more information, right? So we're still kind of working on that, but that's how you are going to submit those accommodation request forms this year, is through TIDE. Okay, if you notice,
that's not live yet, though. It will be.
it will be.
It's just,
Yes.
if you went to go do it today, it's not there.
Okay, so thank you, Elise. And so we'll let you guys know when it is. But can you go back to the next slide really quick? Sorry, Kim. So if you notice the first two bullets, I kind of skipped to that bottom one. So here's what else we're bringing into RISE this year. We are bringing in embedded speech to text or dictation. Okay, so the way it previously worked was if students were using that sort of dictation like a Dragon or like a Google Read and Write, if it worked within the platform, they could do that. Otherwise, some of you may remember the direction was that the student can use a second device, right? We're no longer doing that. So if students are using a piece of technology that works within the platform, right? That's of course where we always want to go, but if not, we're going to force the hand of using the embedded. Now, teams can also choose to just do the embedded if they want. So that is an option. So the other thing you'll notice at the bottom there, what is coming with it is the ability to have word prediction turned on for those kiddos as well. That's going to be a huge one to your special ed people, and you're the first to know about it. Okay, so I will be letting them know in September that that's coming. And both of those have to be turned on by the state and have to be submitted through the request form. Okay, thank you. Next. Okay, big one, Acadian's math accommodations. If you remember last year, we had a lot of questions, a lot of hubbub. So just a reminder, there is a standalone document in the slides that should link you to it that outlines Acadiance's approved accommodations, and then if you go to the next slide, Kim, you also get a chart that will outline what USBE has determined. Remember, I've got those boxes around those things. Students are not allowed to use visual representations, any sort of calculator, comp table. They cannot have extended time, and they cannot do read aloud on Acadiance math. Okay, even if it's written into an IEP, those become modified. That's that modified component. So you'll probably still get a lot of questions around that, direct questions, your special ed teachers, teams to me to help navigate what to do with that, but just be aware of those things. So if you have any questions, UA Plus, ACT goes to Jessica. All of your other assessments come to me. And as we move about, we'll keep informing you guys around TIDE, those request forms. We'll keep you updated on all that. And then hopefully by next week, we can have that accommodations policy out to you. So any questions there so far? Okay. Wasn't a Spanish trans adaptive rise approved by the board? I'm going to let Kim or Sid talk about answer that question.
It was. I want to double check on the timeline. If
Yeah,
I can't remember the date of this year. I think it will be summer of this year, but I want to double check on the timeline. So to be determined.
To be determined. Okay.
To be
Awesome.
confirmed.
Yes.
That's even better. Yes. Okay. Go ahead, Kim. I think Kim's running the slides, right?
Yes.
Okay, alternate assessments. Here we go. So I am your main point of contact for alternate assessments for any of our statewide assessments. IDEA states that anytime we have a required assessment for students, we have to have an alternate assessment for those IEP teams to choose that. That directive also goes down to the district level. So keep that in mind. Anytime you have a district or school-wide required assessment that your students participate in, so for example, benchmarks, right, or some sort of formative, you are also required as a district or a school to provide an alternate assessment. So keep that in mind. Alternate assessments are for students with significant cognitive disabilities, right? These are IEP team decisions. They're the ones that determine whether or not a student has a significant cognitive disability and all the qualifying factors into that. So what we can't have happen is a school administrator or principal cannot go up to the special ed teacher and say, hey, Johnny didn't do super great last year on our RISE testing. We want him to participate in the alternate assessment. It's not how that works, right? So alternate assessments are specifically for students with significant cognitive disabilities as outlined by the IEP team. So here is the list of all of our alternate assessments. So you'll see on the one side, the general assessment. So there's an alternate to our PEEP for those LEAs that are participating in that. There's an alternate to the KEEP. We have an alternate to Acadiance reading, and we have an alternate to Acadiance math. If you remember last year, we did not have that ready for you. It is ready, except for it's still doing a final accessibility check. So we will have those rubrics posted hopefully next week, and we will also put those through the AD memo to you, those rubrics, so that you can get those out to your teachers. So our 1% students, right, those are the ones that participate in that. So we need to make sure that if they're not doing the regular Acadiance reading or math, they're participating in the alternate. So we will have those. If your teachers are chomping at the bit to kind of know what it is literally the same rubric that is set up just the way the early literacy reading one is. It's skill sets, it's scored the same, all of those things. So it's just math skills instead of reading skills. So it's administered the same, looks the exact same. But we'll get that out to you hopefully next week. That'll be finished with accessibility. So for RISE in Utah, Aspire Plus, and ACT, those are our year-end summative assessments. The alternate assessment we have for that is dynamic learning maps. Okay, so our students grades 3 through 11 participate in the ELA and math, and grades 4 through 11 for science. So a couple years ago, we had a lot of, oh, I didn't know our 11th graders were supposed to participate in DLM. Yes, they are. Okay, so the only grade we don't test is 12th grade. Right? But they'll follow the same grades as all of your other testing. There's an alternate access to WIDA. So we do have students with significant cognitive disabilities identified as English learners, right? And so those students should be administered the WIDA alternate. You'll notice we do not have an alternate to NAEP and Apple. The reason being is NAEP is very specific in its testing gen ed students on gen ed standards, right? Like it's a national test, it's very specific. If you're a school, which Angela will talk about, that has these students identified, oh, hey, it's a 1% student, right? They participate in alternate assessments. They do not participate in NAEP, and another student with a disability should be chosen in place of that student. That makes sense. And then Apple is dual language, so it's really specific for what it's doing there. Here's just a slide with some additional links to get you to some additional assessment resources that you can hand out to your teachers, or if you're curious, those are there. Okay, so Acadian's alternate assessments. You will find those rubrics on the special education assessment webpage. They're under the alternate assessment tab. Math is not there yet, accessibility, right? We're hoping to get that out next week, but you'll find all the early literacy there, which is in place of Acadian's reading. Here's the key. You have to have the 1% flag set in your SIS system, okay? So in your SIS system, PowerSchool, Aspire, whatever, wherever it is, and usually within the SCRAM record, is that where you guys find it, my veteran? In the SCRAM record, right? Which is the special ed record indicating the student is special ed. There is a box that says like, is alternate assessment typically, I think. You have to set that. That is the indicator back to us and our team that these are students that should be participating in the alternate assessment, and we use that in a lot of our rules in determining what we're doing with data. Does that make sense? And how we're applying the accountability stuff. So any student from pre-K to 12th grade, if they are an alternate assessment participant, they should have that 1% flag set, okay? With Acadian's reading and Acadian's math, you enter those alternate yes, alternate no met benchmark based upon the scoring rubrics that you'll find packaged in all of that assessment stuff. Those scores go directly into your SIS system. Okay, so it used to be ROGL, reading on grade levels, where you found Acadian's reading. So hopefully your SIS systems have built out the math component, and that's where you put those. Okay, PEEP and KEEP. Here's the difference with PEEP and KEEP alternate assessments. Those rubrics are housed on the assessments webpage. So they're not housed underneath special education. Does that make sense? That's the difference. So you go to special ed, you go to the kindergarten or pre-kindergarten tab in the assessments on the assessment and accountability webpage, and you'll find underneath your regular KEEP and PEEP materials, you'll see the alternates in there. Okay. Here's the difference with scoring. You enter those student scores on the KEEP and PEEP alternate assessment into Data Gateway. So the same place your teachers enter your regular PEEP and KEEP scores, you'll see a tab in there that says alternate. Okay, here's the key, the caveat to that, or caution, I guess, if you will. Be careful when you're doing that. So when they populate those tabs, Sid, unless this is changed, in your regular KEEP and PEEP tab and your alternate, you will see all students listed. Does that make sense? You will not see your regular participants in the regular tab and just your 1% students. They populate all students in both tabs. Okay. All right, next. So skip past that. Okay, DLM. Here's your testing window. Spring window opens up March 13th and runs through June 9th. In your testing plans, you're required to outline, I think it's 8 weeks, right, for your other assessments. Here's what I do not recommend. I do not recommend you hold your teachers and students participating in DLM to that 8-week window. It can be lengthy depending on the nature of your student to get through all of the testlets. I suggest that you allow your teachers that entire window to do what they need to do. However, you as an LEA get to make that determination. I would definitely make sure that your teachers are done well before school ends, right? Their deadline to get finished should be the week before school ends for sure. Okay. Instructionally embedded, there is that mid-year window that opens, I think, on September 12th, closes February. Think of that as a benchmark. So those of you LEAs that are requiring some sort of benchmark or formative assessment for your regular ed kids, wink, wink, DLM does those instructionally embedded modules. That would be your good alternate assessment for those kids. Push your teachers into that. Here's what you need to do for DLM right now. If you have not already gotten access to Educator Portal, typically my assessment directors and special ed directors are the two people that I assign automatically a district test coordinator role to. If you're new, work with your special ed department, you know, who is kind of taking the helm on DLM. But we need to get Educator Portal accounts for you. In order to do that, I need full names, email addresses, and Cactus ID numbers if you have them. I really need you guys to be in touch with your special education directors, right? And I say this every year. I get information to you guys quicker and faster than I do special ed. So for example, right, you already know all these new things that are happening in RISE. Special ed directors have no idea. So I really do rely on you guys to pass down this information, give them these slides, keep them in tune on what's happening. The other thing that we're asking is to please figure out who your EL directors are too. We had a lot of issues last year with ACT and English learners and accommodations and deadlines and time. So please help those guys understand what's happening, especially with accommodations for assessments and deadlines. Get those 1% flags set. We will start hopefully pushing and uploading students this week, if not next week, into DLM. So they'll start rolling in. Okay. The other thing you can do, go to your users and clean up your users in there. If you've got teachers that no longer need accounts, go ahead and deactivate them. Next slide. If you've got teachers that need new accounts created, you can do that. So you can follow these steps here, create the user. Don't forget, we never put a teacher into DLM without the Cactus ID number. That's what helps us duplicate multiple accounts. So if, for example, you hired a new teacher this year and they were in a previous district and may have a DLM account, I will move that teacher to you. Does that make sense? We don't want to add multiple accounts. So when you're adding teachers, if you do get that error that pops up that says teacher already has an existing account somewhere, email me that, right? Your teacher's Cactus ID, their email, the school that they're supposed to be assigned to, and then I move them from the school, old school, to your school. If that makes sense. Okay. Score reports are in. Okay. So they are in Educator Portal. Under the report tabs, go to alternate assessments. Who has access right now? So my district users and a building user are the ones that will have access to those score reports. You do need to please get them into teachers' hands and they need to go home to parents. Okay. The same rules apply to DLM. Teachers will have access to student reports as soon as rosters are created. Okay. We are doing API 1 roster. This year, we started it at the end of last year. Here's the big key. We will no longer roster students. We're just, yes. Brett jumped. Okay. We are no longer rostering students. Last year, when we did our first couple pushes, we did an initial rostering for you. We're not doing that. If you remember, we kind of talked about it last year. Okay, I will be doing a training in October to walk you guys through that. There are resources on the website, and I'll kick that out in the AD memo. I've got a resource that walks you through how to create rosters. We're just dumping kids in and out. It is your responsibility to get all kids rostered. So once they're rostered to a teacher, teachers will then have access to score reports. I know, Hal's looking at me. So sit on that, simmer.
Was it not successful then, or what was the
We
reason for the
don't
change?
have, here's why. So we went as we moved DLM into API 1 roster, I don't have a clean way of rostering students to teachers. If you remember, I don't want to force the hand of you requiring these students to be enrolled in Essential Elements courses, right? We have students that are pushed in to co-taught classes, into gen ed classes, resource teachers, right? We don't want, otherwise I don't know. So what happens is with API, because it's all done, right, through the automated system. So if you've got a student that's rostered to Sally, the gen ed teacher, right, but Jimmy, the special ed teacher, is the one that's supposed to test them, I can no longer go in and make those manual changes, right? Remember, we used to manually change them because what happens is when the load pushes automated, the next day it's going to revert back. Yeah. So until there is something built out in UTREC and your SIS systems to indicate, right, DLM teacher, I have no way of doing rostering in an automatic like way. We're working on that. Those are next steps.
Put the students in a big pool and then we assign from the pool to a teacher.
So they'll
that
go
way.
into their school,
Yeah.
right? They'll go into the school. So you'll pull
Based
up
on the 1% flag.
based on the 1% flag, right? That's where your 1%. We don't know that they should be a DLM unless the 1% flag is set, which means
Right.
they also have to be setting Scram. So that's your special ed side, right? Sometimes they won't start putting in those Scram records until you hit October 1 count. So the sooner, right, your special ed people, right, back to the whole talk to your special ed people, that's really important. So simmer on that. We'll walk you through. There's already some existing resources. You guys were doing some rostering last year. I will be doing a training in October. Look for that in the 80 memos. The next couple 80 memos are going to have a lot of important stuff for me in there. And then that's one thing that we'll walk through in that district training, kind of like we'll do like what we did last year. Get online, I'll record it, I'll post it to the Padlet. All the Padlets are still there. You can move, Kim, I think to the last slide. Oh, and we got rid of the Padlet link. So I'll get all that out to you in 80 memo.
And you do send it to special ed directors or not, this information?
Yep, I do, but I can't. They do, like we do weekly memos to you. I do a monthly. The crappy part about that, maybe I shouldn't have said crappy. The bummer part about that is I have to submit anything that's going to special ed directors like the first week of every month, and then that memo doesn't come out until the end of the month. So things change. Now, Leah's really good if I have specific assessment stuff, which I might just have her blast out a really specific. She'll turn that stuff around, but I do really kind of rely on you guys to pass info down. So some districts, I think how like, for example, a lot of your DLM stuff really housed in your special ed department, but I think you guys have kind of started taking a little bit more charge in it. You know, so navigate that.
It's always a blended project.
It is. With DLM, it totally is. Absolutely. So, and you can do an upload. So the best way to do it, Hal, would be to create those upload templates. And you can, you get it into the spreadsheet and then you can push an upload and it will do. So it just depends on how many kids. If you've got a couple kids, it's easier to go in and manually do it. If you're, loading a bunch. Okay. There's my email. Contact me. Questions, concerns. Look for that training. You don't have to panic about it yet. Okay, thank you.
We're going to move through our formative tools really fast. Quick reminder, Utah Compose, they just barely added the institution file, so the teachers should have access to it. Of course, we're still waiting for all the rosters, but it is available, just so you're aware, till through June 2029. Remember that there's a little checklist. If you are a district or school admin, I create those accounts, so you'll want to reach out to me so I can create them for you. And then once I do that, you'll want to go in and deactivate any of your obsolete LEA or district or school admin accounts. The system doesn't automatically know that, and I don't know who they are, so that is up to you. The other thing you want to double check is verify your Utah Compose upload. Remember that stale submission thing? It affects Utah Compose more than any other of our assessment vendors. Please make sure that you do that. And then just a quick reminder, if you have an admin account, you cannot create teacher accounts. Teachers have to do that themselves, and here's how they do that. And as always, if anyone's struggling with that, just have them reach out to me and I'll troubleshoot it for them.
All right, for UTIPS, it is available. I will be hosting a training for anybody on the September 14th from 2 to 3. It will be recorded. You can register for that through Midas if you choose to. Next slide. With UTIPS, remember this is available for all students, K through 12. It allows teachers to create their own assessments. They can use anything from the item bank or create their own items. It will sync with your school's SIS system, so teacher rosters are already there and ready to go, but just like anything with UTREX, you do need to allow at least 48 hours for that sync to occur. And then if you need new accounts, they can either reach out to you or they can also reach out to me. I'm happy to set up new accounts as well. I included a link to the wiki there with other questions. For Apple, we will conduct an Apple training on September 15th, also from 2 to 3. You can register for that through Midas.
This is specifically for dual language schools. Understand that just because your school may take the Apple test, it does not mean they are a dual immersion school. So understand that there's a divide there. I only work specifically with the dual immersion program. So there's a window for that, where there's some confusion, where there are some schools that take it in spring. They're not a dual immersion school, but they can take the Apple test. I've included some links here about how to manage teacher accounts, the Apple Utah webpage, the demo version, other things that are helpful with Apple. But again, if this applies to you, just attend the training. And if you can't during that time, we will record it. It will be posted on our YouTube channel. The window, if you need to write it down for this particular Apple session, is going to be October 17th through December 2nd.
All right, Megan Lopez here. Sorry I'm not there in person. Contact information, please let myself or Anne-Michelle Neal know anytime you have any questions. Let's get into a couple of quick screening reminders since we are at the beginning of the year. Please remember that you will only screen students based on the home language survey. So if any of the 3 questions asking about language at home are answered with anything other than English, then that would trigger the need for a student to be screened. The home language survey does not qualify the students for language surveys. It is the screener. Since we are at the beginning of the year, I know most LEAs are doing these a lot right now. Please remember that federal law requires that students be screened within 30 days of enrollment from that first day of school. So you have 30 calendar days. After those 30 days are up, and students that enroll after that point in your schools, then you have 10 school days to get them screened. And also please remember that a screener should only be administered once in Utah. So if a student is new to Utah, then you're going to be screening these students. If they have come from another LEA in Utah, please just look in the data gateway, see if they have previous records. You can contact me or contact the previous school to see if they have been screened and already qualified for services. Remember that right now, that magic score to qualify for services is a 4.9 composite or lower. So if they score a 5.0 composite or higher, they do not qualify for language services and are not going to be considered an English learner. We are an online state, so all students should be taking the screener online. If you need paper, especially for new students that are unfamiliar with technology, please reach out to me. We do provide paper when appropriate, and we can get that to you. You do not need to buy those. We purchase that for you. And all WIDA screener for kindergarten materials are also all free, and you access all of that in the WIDA secure portal. All right, next. Okay, believe it or not, a couple of access dates that I want you to have ready and just keep in the back of your mind is coming up in October. Since you are in screening right now, we just ask that all of your ELs be identified appropriately in your SIS systems. So this is something that LEAs need to do. So again, we have to send in the pre-ID file, and I'm so sorry, Terilyn, I know October is really early, but that is not a choice that we get to make. It is a choice that WIDA and DRC make to get everything loaded into their system. I know there are discussions about doing kind of a one roster and nightly uploads, but nothing like that has happened and probably won't for the next few years. So we do need to have your SIS as updated as possible. If anyone is missed, you can always enter students manually into AMS later. And then also just remember, we at the state will do all of your access test material orders for you based on that pre-ID file, but you will need to order any Braille or alternate access. And here's the window for that, since we can't determine which students are doing that. Now, one thing that has come up with Access this year is when LEAs are going to be receiving their Access materials this year. All LEAs will receive their Access materials on January 3rd or 4th, and those are delivered by UPS. This year, a lot of LEAs have just totally different winter breaks, and some LEAs are going to be on winter break. So we have two solutions to this problem. The first solution is just ensure that an employee is on site to receive the shipments, since they do need to be signed for, since they are secure test materials. The other solution is to contact me immediately. There is a deadline, okay? So you have a couple of weeks to decide, September 2nd. I do have to let DRC know if you want this, but we can have your shipments delayed a week and sent the following week when your school is back in. So I do need to know by September 2nd, Friday, September 2nd, if you would like your materials shipped later, but please do note that the test window will not be extended. All right, and then we've gotten a lot of questions about the Data Gateway reports. Those will be available. The WIDA Access Data Gateway reports will be available in mid-September, as in previous years. I've had a lot of questions again about this. We were able to make them available 2 years ago, earlier, just because no other assessments were being loaded and because we didn't have any assessments then. But we are back on our usual timeline. We know that schools would like to have those earlier, but hopefully, you know, we'll keep pushing and see what we can do to improve that. All right, and then a couple of training opportunities. We do have, I know you're in screening right now. We do have a couple of screening webinars if you would like to attend those. If these are a little too late for you, these were the earliest we could get WIDA to do them, since their rollover isn't till September 1st for trainings. You can do the self-paced online trainings for test administration in the WIDA Secure portal. And then we do have an upcoming training in person. It's a 2-day training, and it is more content-based. It's scaffolded learning through language. And I believe that is it. I do see one question in the chat about the exit scores being revised. That nothing has changed yet. It is all still under discussion, has to go to board to even be approved. There's a lot of steps that need to be that need to take place before anything is official. If and when any exit criteria changes for our English learners, we will make sure that we message it out very, very heavily. And again, just contact me if you have any questions or put questions into the chat. Thanks.
Next slide. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. So testing window for PEEP is right now 4 weeks before school to 4 weeks after the first day of school. Make sure your teachers have that appropriate role so that they can actually administer the assessment. And then remember to get your data in by September 30th into Data Gateway. So it does still have to be manual rostering for the PEEP assessment. Go ahead. For KEEP, go ahead. Very similar. The data, the window is 3 weeks before to 3 weeks after the first day of school. Outside of that window, please do not assess them. You are welcome to do that for your own information, but don't report those scores in Data Gateway. The data does need to be entered by September 30th. The assessment must be given in English. We do not have Spanish translation. That is not an accommodation that is allowable. And make sure your teachers have the appropriate role, either the assessment school user or the KEEP administrator. And then for Acadians reading, we're in that beginning of year benchmark. There has been a number of some issues with just getting things going. So please check your UTREX. If you are not seeing students enrolled within your Amplify system, check your UTREX system, make sure there's no fatal errors. And you have until September 30th to provide that assessment. And all students grades 1 through 3 and those kindergarten 4 through 6 is optional. And then the data does need to be in the system and parents notified by October 30th. And make sure you add those special codes into your SIS system and just note students who are below grade level and if they're going to be receiving interventions. So that reading composite score is required. That is a requirement. That only happens if the student receives an assessment for every measure within the Acadience assessments. Notification does need to be given to parents. That diagnostic assessment must be given to any student who is below grade level. So this is new because of Senate Bill 127. And you are required to provide interventions to students who are not on grade level and progress monitor at the level they are receiving interventions. And that progress monitoring scores does need to be in your Acadience platform, whatever it is you're using. So that data does need to be in there. Okay, next slide. And just a reminder about invalidations. There are only specific reasons to invalidate, and all invalidations need to be emailed to me, and just I need that information. Next slide. I'll turn it over to Jared. Really quick question. So no, just Acadience. So Acadience Keep and Peep, the alternate windows are the exact same as the regular.
Where am I talking? Or it just picks it up? Okay. All right. With Acadience Math, the testing windows are the same as Acadience Reading, so I haven't included those here. You can just refer to what Teresa shared. I did want to share 2 slides as we went through the data for this past year with Acadience Learning. There were a couple things at a state level I just wanted to pull out and share with you. So the first one here are targets of opportunity at each grade level that the state assesses. 4 through 6 are up to the LEA. So here I'm focusing K through 3. But the first one, you can see kindergarten would be strategic counting, and the data for that came from Next Number Fluency. So hopefully you're seeing how I've laid out the slide. For first grade, magnitude comparison from advanced quantity discrimination. What that was is just a student looks at 2 sets or 2 numbers, and they have to point and say which number is larger. For strategic counting Next Number Fluency, that's where the assessor will say a number and the student has to respond with the next number. For second grade and third grade, really its computation was just where opportunity to grow. For second and third grade, there's computation, and then there's concepts and application, and computation was the lower score. That's why it's here, which was interesting for me at least, because we often get, as we're providing training and hearing back from LEAs, there's concern about concepts and applications because that's kind of where the story problems are. That's where the text is for students. And there's concern about students being able to read that and respond. But based on what we saw with the Utah data, we have a slight edge over nationally Acadience Learning data. So I thought that was interesting. Next slide. This was also interesting. I thought very positive for Utah. You'll notice in the green on the graph, the green is the national data that Acadience Learning has. The purple is Utah data. And you'll notice that for nationally, they start higher than Utah for kindergarten, but then they have a drop, whereas Utah starts lower, but work consistently each grade level, increasing and improving. So by the end of third grade. We're right up where we should be. And I think, in my opinion, that's a nice view to be able to be improving each year, K through 3. And then this one, I'll let you read that. There's a lot of text there. It's not necessarily a presentation slide, but we are providing data analysis training, both Acadians reading and math. And you can see there's an option for school leaders that will be the focus on those, and then teachers. And that's just letting you know what the focus is. It's not necessarily limiting who can attend, but just so you know. And if there's any questions, just share them. Otherwise, you can get back to me. That's it.
All right, a few things for RISE. I will be conducting RISE training on September 22nd. Section 1 is going to be from 9 to 10 a.m. It's going to be for basics like high level, new users. If you want a quick refresher, that's fine. And then from 10 to noon, anybody is welcome to attend. We'll go a little bit deeper. As a reminder here, if you're not receiving the updates, you'll want to go to the RISE portal and click that little subscribe for updates so that you get all of the portal updates as they come. The secure browsers are available for download. There's information for that on the portal as well. If you're struggling though, you're welcome to send me an email and I can help you with that. Kim had mentioned testing windows previously. Just as a reminder with that, your testing windows, especially for the summative ones, you'll want to put in Tide so that tests are not administered in error or as a misstep. For your new school year, you will need to click the little blue link at the very bottom that says first time logging in this year so that you can change your password. Remember, when you do that, you are going to get a validation email that you need to go click on in roughly 15 minutes or so to create your new password for your RISE portal login. For Utah Aspire Plus high school benchmark training, that will be held September 29th. Again, you can register through Midas. Similar to RISE, the first hour, 9 to 10, is going to be very high level. We're going to look at Pearson Access next, little step by step, but not go into too much detail. Then from 10 to noon, anybody, if you're more familiar with it, you might want to skip that first hour. But if you want your refresher, you're always welcome. For the Utah Core Standards, the high school benchmarks, these are available for students enrolled in any assessment generating course. And the courses are based on ELA, math, and science. They're about 7 to 15 questions each. You can search them by standard or strand. They can be taken as many times as a teacher desires. Similar to the RISE benchmarks, so it can be used for some longitudinal data. The scores on these are not reported back to the state. They're for local use only. So just be aware of that. They are there and ready for you if you'd like to use them. A couple of things to be aware of with the Pearson and Utah Aspire Plus site. You'll want to start checking user accounts. To do that, you want to check your file information. You can still use the bulk spreadsheet upload to do that. But the clicks are there as well. You go into setup, import and export your data. You hit the start button, use the user export. You can download the CSV from there to check that information. And then the next important thing you'll want to do, next slide, is ensure that the work request email is set up appropriately. This just makes it so that you can receive notifications anytime there is a work request to or from you for transferring students and things like that. So just update it if it's needed. And slide. The manuals are posted on the Resource Center. For benchmarks, there's a specific benchmark manual, so you don't need to use the Utah Aspire Plus manual. There is one that is specific for benchmarks. So if you have teachers who are going to use those, make sure that they know that there's a separation between those two documents. Next slide.
Science is up, finally. Yay. We had a lot of reviews this summer and got a lot of feedback from some of our teachers. One of the things we noticed is this is kind of a weird thing. We've never done a data review. We have students that score highly on the test, but they're missing correct answers more often on some of our questions. And that's a little concerning because they usually do well on the test and they're missing all these correct answers. And the feedback from the workshop educators in every one of these workshops was that students are not reading the material involved in the tables and the graphs. And so they're not reading the text. They get taught, especially in a lot of ACT prep areas, read the text, read the graph, read the table, get your information from there. And what they're not realizing is some of the science things, there are relationships that happen at the inverse. The question is asking them that information, and it's in the text, either right above or right below. It's right there, and we can tell they're not reading the text. They're just looking at the pretty pictures. And so we need them we need to get that information out. I'm getting it out as much as I can to the science teachers, but everywhere we can. Teachers need to know that they need to be having their students read that text. Yeah, every time this happened, that information was in the accompanying text. Exactly what was, you just had to read the text, they would have gotten the answer easily. There's been some scoring difference between white groups and our Hispanic students. And the concern of the educators and the students are whether or not EL students are receiving their proper accommodations. Tracy mentioned earlier about how we've seen a decline in the accommodation requests. We saw a pretty precipitous one, I know, in the ACT. And it makes us wonder if these kids have a 4.9 or lower on that WIDA assessment, they should be getting these tests in their native language. They should be getting those accommodations. And if they're not, we're hamstringing them. We're hurting them. We don't want to do that. We want to be able to give them the accommodations. And so that was a concern just from the educators going, well, are these kids getting the accommodations? Because in English, the answers are there. Every other group is doing okay, but our big Spanish subgroup is not. And so just some review trends, so you at least know that. If you hear someone talking about that, you can at least speak to it. Next slide. We have a lot of tools to help teachers with this. We've got the benchmarks. These, especially the high school benchmarks, are not used enough. And we're starting finally to get high school educators contacting us going, what can I do? I'm finding out I'm not teaching the standards as well as I should be. They're getting feedback from their administrators going, hey, your science grade is bringing down the school score. And that's starting to finally get some traction there. We have the training test, the question samplers. You may know or may not know about the Utah Core Guides. Last summer, before last summer, we brought educators together in a massive workshop, and we have now got in most of our standards for science embedded formative assessment tools like the clusters in the benchmarks that teachers can take and print and use and rewrite and manipulate. And they went through the evaluation process that a lot of our summative questions went through. They went through writing, they went through content review. We had EL specialists, special ed specialists. We had members in the community from different diverse groups to tell us if there was any bias or sensitivity issues on these before they got published. And so they've gone through a lot of those reviews and they've been vetted very thoroughly. And so in UTIPS, yeah, it's still there. I still will go give presentations to Google. I thought UTIPS died years ago. Still there, and teachers can write cluster style questions in it now. So it's another great tool that's available.
They can copy the questions right from the core guides.
You can copy the questions from the core guides and put them in there.
Put them right in.
There's all kinds of things. We got a lot of good feedback in these workshops. They said when teachers first see the benchmark assessments, they realize their own curriculum needs improvement. In one example, an educator gave a quiz where students were scoring a 9 and 10 on their quiz, and on the benchmark only got 1 out of 9. And that let them, at first they're like, well, hey, maybe the test is just too hard. And when they looked at the standard and what was being asked, they realized, no, that test, that benchmark is doing exactly what's in the standard. Maybe I'm not teaching at a level where it should be. And that leads to all kinds of discussions on things like grade inflation and other problems that could be existing on that also. Educators in Iron County reported that after starting to use the core guide formative tools and benchmark assessments, overall proficiency on the rise rose over 20 points from the previous year. That was at one of our middle schools down there, and I appreciated that feedback from those teachers. That was just from using those tools formatively to assess and help the students. And so please use those tools that are out there. We want to make sure that these new standards detail what students are supposed to be doing, not what teachers do to them. And so we don't want death by PowerPoint. A lot of teachers will say, I'll go, well, what science practice were you using in the classroom today? And they'll say, we were using obtaining information. And I'm like, no, you didn't. You did death by PowerPoint. Well, students were obtaining information. No, they weren't. They were writing notes. Students obtaining information is them getting into books, them getting on the internet, them making the PowerPoint presentation, and then giving that presentation to you, their teacher. That's them doing the practice. The students have to be doing it, and that's been a big turn, a big mind shift for a lot of our teachers. They're used to doing and not having the students do it. Jessica and I are working a lot with everything ACT. I'm going to go through this quicker than I'd like to, but there's a lot of stuff. We cut a lot out, unfortunately. We've got more next month. Be here next month for more updates. We've got a lot more to go. There's been changes to ACT Success in the Knowledge Hub. Make sure you can log in at success.act.org. If you can't, contact the help desk and find out what's going on there. The reporting section has been updated. There's new instructions on how to update that and download your data. Please note, ACT no longer is sending out CDs with school or LEA data. You need to download it here. Okay? So it's all good. It's all gone the way of the 21st century, finally. I couldn't believe it. I heard they're still sending out CDs. I had to remember what those were for a minute. Contact ACT at the number that's listed here or at that email address. Remember, only 5 years of data is kept on that site. And so September 1st, any records from 2017 to 2018 will be removed as that becomes the 6th year, right? So new things. Utah has a dedicated customer service phone line. This is for Utah only. They have Utah trained specialists that are there to answer Utah specific questions. The ACT has been working hard on improving their customer service. So make sure you have that number down because that number is going to be where you want to go. They reported to us that overall user satisfaction for call-ins to the helpline was 93% positive, and they felt that was way too low. They wanted it to be a lot better. There's the Utah College and Readiness Workshop at Salt Lake Community College on October 26th. And just this past week, we got the news. ACT will allow iPads for this next spring. That was really new because I was at a conference earlier this year where they said it might be in 24. And so they moved it quick, just within a month or two, switched that to 23. So that's going to be coming up also. Thinking about your technology, if your school is not teaching online for ACT, if you're still doing paper tests, you might want to switch this year because they also announced that in 24 or 25, ACT is switching everyone over to online testing.
So the 23-24 school year or the 23?
Don't know yet. It's going to be one of those two.
Be determined, yeah.
Yeah, but not this year, but either the next year or the year after. And so our thinking on that is if you switch now, you avoid a big headache if there is a problem. You have to call into the help desk and find out there's 40 other people that called in ahead of you and you got to wait in line.
If the results came back faster, I would get my high schools the sooner the results versus paper.
And that's
we need to promote that more.
We do have results coming back a lot faster, and some of those slides got cut. But there's going to be a speed up in the results that are coming back
than last year.
Yes,
previous years. Mm-hmm. Fabulous.
Yeah, that's the report we're getting from ACT is especially with the new success system. With every student logging into that system and with us using that system, reports are supposed to come back faster. They're not going to give me a hard amount, but yeah, we'll get into that a little more next month too. But that's the goal. A lot of training's coming up. September 8th, there's ACT accommodations training, and there's some online training workshops. Just keep note of those dates. I want to make sure we have a lot of time and actually get done on time today. There's actually dates and information in there. There really is, I swear. I saw it on the slides. Paper. ACT used to send out note paper. They're not going to do that anymore. They got tired of paying for shipping and getting blank paper back. right? So their suggestion is that you hand out, you can still use paper, every student can have note paper when they take the test, that's fine. But take and print out their login information on that sheet of paper, hand it to them, have them log in, have them write their notes, collected at the end, and then you securely destroy that information. But they're not going to be shipping paper to you anymore, and they're not going to be having it shipped back to help essentially cut their costs. And anything else on there that I can't remember right now, I'll figure out and we'll send it to you in an AD memo.
If you wanna send it to me, I can edit it and put it in the recording when I post it.
I can do that too, yeah. Because I don't want to mess up anything on my screen.
I think the information's in the PowerPoint that they got, the PDF. It's got to be something weird with Nearpod, you guys. So.
Yeah, something got blanked out. It's weird. But we'll get that information to you at least in the next thing. And for accommodations, this is all Jessica's slide.
Okay, so right after we had our meeting last Thursday and I announced our accommodation submission deadline, ACT changed it. So the ACT accommodation deadline for students who have an IEP, a 504, and are English language learners, so be communicating with those people within your district, is January 13th for any test administration date that you're going to choose for your LA in the spring. There is no late submissions. That January 13th is a hard deadline for any testing window, online or paper, for your 504 students, your students who have IEPs, and your English learners. So key with that, and we went through this last year, if they don't get entered and we get the phone call we forgot to do, we didn't get the information, it happened a lot last year from special ed directors. The risk that is run is the LEA has now denied the student their FAPE, which can land in due process, right? And you will lose. Hands down, every time, right? LEA will lose. So please, please help them realize that this deadline it's hard. It's hard and fast. We had to provide guidance to LEAs last year on how do you navigate those legal waters when you have just denied students their services when you're not submitting those in a timely fashion. There's nothing that we can do to get around that. So that's not a phone call, and I'm not make that phone call for you. So that's not a conversation that I ever want to have with parents, you know, oh, I'm sorry, we forgot to do this. We should be doing better as educators. So for ACT, before you submit any accommodations requests, you do want to make certain you have a signed consent form on file. You can file those within your LEA. Yeah. And that's it. I addressed all those points.
Shmoop, hear about Shmoop? A lot of people are starting to hear about Shmoop. It's starting to get a lot more traction, which is actually kind of nice. The state's been paying for it for a long time, and kids have access to it in terms of alternative training. So the older version was retired August 1st. Kids got to see a warning banner and let them know about the change as well. You need to make sure you had this newer product, ACT Exam Prep. There's a quick video tutorial from Shmoop on how to do that. If you have any questions, Autumn Ackerman is awesome. She's really good at responding, get you what you need. A reminder also, this year's password is Aspen. To give you a hint, it's the state tree. Easy to remember. And so integration is needed at the campus or district level in order to access Shmoop. If you need help with that, just reach out to support.shmoop and support@shmoop.com. And if you have any problem setting up integration, there is a training August 25th.
Yeah, it's on there.
With that, and so, and we've actually heard that that was announced at the new AD meeting also, and they've got a lot of people already signing up for that. So, should be good to see that training. And here's your Shmoop team if you need any help from any other information. Real quick, that slide that had those ACT expectations, individual student reports will only be shipped to schools from now on. There's going to be one training packet that was sent to schools will no longer be sent. Everything is going online. So any training packets that you need, materials are available online from the our ACT site for Utah. And then data files and reports accessible in success.act.org will no longer be available at Pearson Access Next. They will only be available in that success.act.org. So those are the other updates from ACT on those things. So any questions? Where are your people for that? Questions on accommodations? See Jessica. Questions on the rest of the tests? Contact me.
Okay, I am Callista, and I am from the data and statistics team, Aaron's team. David and I are the primary contacts for running the graduation rate at the state. In April, we did give a training specific to assessment directors. And so if you were not able to make that, I just included those slides again here. But for today, we can go ahead and skip to that second presentation that starts with graduation rate for 2022. And there is some overlap between the two. So this was the presentation that we gave to UTREX administrators in our LEA monthly data meeting, but we want to make sure and get it out to all people that work with graduation rate data. So just as a way of announcement, the preliminary grad rate was run with the 2022 cohort data. We run that after the finalized year-end UTREX submission, which the deadline for that this year was July 7th, and there were some setbacks. So that was run in the last few weeks. After that preliminary rate is run, we then have several places that you can review the data prior to October. The one source we have already sent out through MoveIt in the SURF folder. There's two files. It has the same exact data that would be displayed in the graduation rate preview report on Data Gateway. However, we can get it out faster through MoveIt. Once the preview report is done by IT, that will also be up for you to review all the way through October. And then I gave some instructions on where to find that. Once it is up on Data Gateway, it's under the My Tools drop-down under graduation, and it's in the same place that the UZI report is also located. Those are currently grayed out only because IT is still working on those. But again, we have already sent the data through MoveIt to every LEA in the state. The purpose of these reports is for LEAs to review all of your graduation rate data prior to the October UTREX submission. Anything can be changed or updated prior to October, so you have a few months. And we're really trying to get the word out that anyone who works with graduation data, whether it's at the district or school level, should be reviewing these reports. It does need to be changed in UTREX, however. All right, next slide. So the UZI report is specific to adult education data, and this is the only source for that data. This was not in the MoveIt files. IT is working on this, and the goal is for it to be out by the end of August. This report will include all students who passed the GED between last July 2021 and July 15th of 2022. If a student passed outside of that window and you know that, you would just need to verify that with GED yourself. And again, the importance of this is because the exit code GE will turn to a dropout if it's not updated to reflect that the student actually passed the GED. All right, next slide. This is more heavy on the UTREC side, but again, we just want to present it to you so you know there is a formal process to make the updates once you have reviewed the reports and find that there are students you want to change prior to October. The UTREC submission deadline is October 7th. So you have from now until then to get anything reviewed and updated. Once you find those updates that need to be made, it varies district to district or LEA to LEA. So in smaller LEAs, I imagine it's easier to get in contact with the UTREX person. So again, that process might look different in every district, but the changes do need to be made in UTREX. So a school principal can't just make it on their end, and it can't just be done in the SIS because now we've rolled over to a new school year. So there's two ways to update past year data. One is the S1X record update, and the second is a historical update request. It's not an either or scenario. There's specific requirements that a S1X would be required or that a historical update would be required. And if you have more questions on that, you can reach out to me or David directly. The historical update requests are always due 2 weeks prior to the UTREC submission deadline, and that's just because those are manual. In general, you will have fewer historical update requests because most updates can be made with an S1X record update, and those can be made right up until the deadline of October 7th. Those are in your SIS, and generally for graduation rate data purposes, the thing to consider is if the student is still enrolled currently in your LEA. If they are not, then you can change their past year code with an S1X update. And then just as an announcement, once you make those updates, the report won't necessarily change. It's not connected to live data. So if you want to see that those updates actually went through, you can either contact me, you can have your UTREX person look in their examine file. There's a few ways to check that those actually went through, but the reports are not live, so those won't change. All right, next slide. Then this is just general information. It's how we actually calculate the rate. I won't go over every detail on this, but it's not just a matter of being a graduate or a dropout. There's actually 5 outcomes. Graduate, dropout, which are the most obvious ones, but then other completer, continuing student, or excluded. Those outcomes are directly determined by the exit code or completion status code that are submitted for students at year end. All of those codes, I would highly recommend referring to the link that I provided. It's in the Federal Graduation and Dropout Code reference, and you can see directly what code equates to what outcome. And then if you were to actually calculate your rate, it's the number of graduates divided by the total cohort minus any excluded students. All right, next slide. Similarly, you can check your dropouts. We don't publish this rate, but it's the same calculation, the number of dropouts divided by the cohort minus the excluded. Because other completers and continuing students are excluded from the dropout count, the two rates aren't going to necessarily equal 100%. All right, next slide. These are specific codes that we would highly recommend you paying attention to between now and October. This is because these are the codes that will turn to a dropout if not updated. The graduation pending code, I already talked about the exit to take the GED. If they actually pass the GED, that does have to be changed. And then similarly, if they exit to go to adult ed, that will turn to a dropout if you don't show that they actually graduated. And then the more obvious ones, expelled, unknown, withdraw. All right, next slide.
These ones aren't as obvious for continuing students. They're all of the transfer codes. Most LEAs don't realize that these will count as a dropout against you if the student is not picked up by another LEA. And in some cases, there's nothing you can do about this. It's kind of out of your control, but you just want to review the data to make sure that they are coded correctly. Next slide. And then for this year, after the October 1 submission data is finalized, we will run the final grad rate for 2022, and then you will be able to review that again in the same place, but we will update that report. The final grad rate report will be published and made available publicly not till December. So we allow LEAs to review that before we push it public. If you have any questions on any of this or on specific students or on your report, you can contact myself or David. We're both on Aaron's team. And it looks like the only question in the chat was about Move It, and Emily responded about that. Emily Ng on the assessment team can help with account access issues for those Move It files. And that's all I have. Thank you.
And that was the last slide. If anybody has any comments, questions, feel free to come off mute, type them in the chat box, and we are happy to answer them. Otherwise, we ended, believe it or not, with 167 slides, 6 minutes early.
It's like a Christmas miracle.
Yeah. You have no idea.
I'm shocked.